The glass doors of Hallbrook Global opened quietly at 6 every morning. Most employees never noticed who arrived first, but every single day, before the executives, before the managers, before the assistants rushing in with their coffees, a woman in a gray cleaning uniform pushed a small cart through the lobby. Her name was Naomi Carter. To the employees, she was invisible, just the cleaner, the woman who wiped their desks, the one who emptied their trash, the one people barely looked at when they walked past. But that morning, something unusual was about to happen, because in exactly 3 hours, the most important board meeting of the year would begin, and the woman cleaning the conference room floor was secretly the owner of the entire company. But nobody knew that. Not the arrogant executives, not the employees who laughed behind her back, and definitely not the manager who would humiliate her later that morning. Naomi moved slowly across the polished floor, her mop gliding quietly. She listened, always listening, because this wasn't just cleaning, it was research. A month earlier, Naomi had made a shocking discovery about the company her late father built. Reports weren't matching, money was disappearing, departments were failing, employees were quitting. Something was wrong inside Hallbrook Global. But Naomi knew that if she walked in as the CEO, everyone would pretend everything was perfect. So she did something nobody expected. She came back undercover as a cleaner, watching, listening, learning the truth. And what she had already heard in just 3 weeks was worse than she imagined. One executive had been secretly manipulating contracts. Another manager had been humiliating lower staff daily. And the company culture her father once protected had turned toxic. But Naomi stayed silent, because sometimes the only way to see the truth is to become invisible. She dipped her mop into the bucket again, just as 2 employees walked into the lobby. They didn't notice her at first, but when they did, one of them rolled his eyes. "Hey, cleaner lady," he snapped. "You missed a spot over there." Naomi calmly nodded. "Yes, sir." The man laughed to his friend as they walked away, and Naomi kept mopping. But behind her calm expression, she was remembering every single face, every voice, every insult. Because very soon, they would all learn who she really was. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button. Give this video a like and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. Hallbrook Global wasn't supposed to be like this. 30 years earlier, Naomi's father built the company from nothing. He started in a tiny office with 3 employees and one belief: respect everyone, from the janitor to the CEO. But after he passed away 2 years ago, everything changed. Executives started chasing profits at any cost. Managers bullied employees to meet impossible targets. And somewhere along the way, people stopped seeing each other as human. Naomi had inherited the company quietly. But instead of announcing herself immediately, she waited. She watched. And what she saw broke her heart. That same morning, she pushed her cart into the marketing department. A group of employees were laughing loudly. One of them dropped a stack of papers onto the floor, then pointed at Naomi. "Hey, cleaner! Pick that up!" Another employee chuckled. "Yeah, that's literally your job." Naomi bent down silently and gathered the papers. But as she handed them back, she noticed something strange. Confidential marketing numbers. Numbers that should only be discussed in executive meetings. Which meant someone was leaking information. She memorized the details, then quietly continued cleaning. But as she left the room, she heard someone whisper behind her, "Man, imagine being stuck cleaning floors your whole life." More laughter. Naomi didn't turn around, but her hands tightened around the cleaning cart, because the people mocking her had no idea they were laughing at the person who owned the building they stood in. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. If you were Naomi, watching your own employees disrespect others like this, what would be going through your mind? By 9:15 a.m., the building was buzzing. Executives rushed toward the conference floor. Assistants printed reports. Coffee machines hummed nonstop. And Naomi pushed her cart toward the executive hallway. That's when she ran into Derek Lawson, the operations manager. a man Naomi had already identified as one of the biggest problems inside the company. He stopped in front of her, frowning. "What are you doing here?" "Cleaning the hallway, sir." "Well, do it faster," he snapped. "Important people work here." Naomi stayed calm. "Yes, sir." But Derek wasn't done. He looked at her uniform and laughed. "You cleaners are all the same, slow and clueless." Several employees nearby laughed. Naomi quietly moved aside so they could pass. But Derek suddenly kicked the trash bin near her cart. "Clean that up. You people are useless." Trash spilled across the floor. Naomi bent down and picked it up slowly. Every single person watching assumed she was embarrassed. But Naomi wasn't embarrassed. She was observing. Because the louder Derek became, the clearer the truth was becoming. Halbrook Global wasn't failing because of the market. It was failing because of people like him. People who believed power meant cruelty. But the worst moment came minutes later. Because Derek glanced toward the conference room doors, then pointed at Naomi. "Hey, cleaner, don't even think about going near that room today. That meeting is way above your pay grade." Naomi nodded, but inside, she almost smiled. Because Derek had no idea, that meeting belonged to her. At exactly 10 a.m., the board meeting began. 10 executives sat around the polished conference table. Charts filled the large screen. Profits had dropped, departments were failing, and nobody wanted to take responsibility. Instead, they blamed the market, the economy, the employees, anyone except themselves. Outside the room, Naomi waited quietly with her cart, listening through the slightly open door, because everything they were saying was a lie. One executive claimed a contract was successful, but Naomi had already seen the hidden losses. Another manager blamed employees for poor performance, but Naomi had witnessed the toxic environment firsthand. The truth was clear. The company wasn't failing because workers were lazy. It was failing because leadership had forgotten what leadership meant. Naomi looked at the clock. 10:27 a.m., the perfect moment. She straightened her uniform, then pushed the conference room door open. The room went silent instantly. 10 executives stared at her. Derek Lawson stood up first. "What are you doing in here?" he barked. "I'm sorry," Naomi said calmly. "I just needed a moment." "Get out," Derek snapped. "This meeting is for executives only." A few people laughed quietly. One woman whispered, "Did the cleaner get lost?" But Naomi didn't move. Instead, she walked slowly toward the head of the table. Derek slammed his hand on the desk. "I said get out!" Naomi finally looked directly at him, and for the first time, there was something different in her eyes. Confidence, authority. Then she spoke. "Actually, I think I'm exactly where I belong." Confused murmurs filled the room. Derek scoffed. "Security!" But before anyone could move, the chairman of the board suddenly stood up. His voice was calm but firm. "Everyone sit down." The room froze. Then he turned toward Naomi and nodded respectfully. "Ms. Carter, would you like to begin?" The room exploded with confusion. Derek blinked. What did you just call her?" The chairman looked directly at him. "Naomi Carter, the majority owner of Halbrook Global." Silence. The kind of silence that feels like the air has been sucked out of the room. Derek's face turned pale, because the cleaner he had just insulted was his boss. Naomi slowly removed her cleaning gloves, then placed them gently on the table. "I spent the last month working inside this building," she said calmly, "not as the owner. But as someone none of you noticed." She looked around the table. "At first, I thought I might learn about business problems." Her voice hardened slightly. "Instead, I learned about people." She turned toward Derek. "I watched employees get humiliated. I watched managers insult workers. And I watched executives lie about the company's performance." No one spoke, because every person in the room suddenly realized something terrifying. She had seen everything. "Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in Naomi's journey so far, and share your thoughts in the comments. Naomi opened a folder. Inside were weeks of notes, evidence, reports, witness statements. "Derek Lawson," she said calmly, "you humiliated staff daily. You manipulated budgets. And you lost the company $3 million last quarter." Derek's voice shook. You can't prove that." Naomi slid a document across the table. "I already did." Security entered moments later. Derek Lawson was escorted out of the room, but he wasn't the only one. 2 other executives were fired that morning. One resigned immediately. Because Naomi wasn't just revealing the truth. She was rebuilding the company the way her father intended, with respect, with accountability, with leadership that actually cared about people. 3 months later, Halbrook Global looked different. Employees were treated fairly. Managers were trained to lead, not intimidate, and the company's profits began rising again. But the most surprising change happened one afternoon, when Naomi walked through the lobby again, not in a cleaning uniform, but as CEO. Employees stood a little straighter. People greeted each other kindly. Because everyone remembered the story of the cleaner who turned out to be the owner, and nobody wanted to forget that lesson again. Sometimes, the most powerful person in the room is the one nobody notices. Thank you for watching this story. And before you go, I'd really love to hear your thoughts. If you were in Naomi's position, would you have done the same thing, working undercover to uncover the truth? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to Underestimated Saga, and share this story with someone who believes respect should never depend on a job title. Because stories like Naomi's remind us of something important. Never underestimate anyone. You never know who they truly are.